Welcome back to the Retirement Fiduciary Podcast, a place where we have authentic, no BS discussions about retirement planning, investment strategies, and wealth management. Whether you're approaching retirement or if you've already made work optional, this show is for you. Now, here's your host, Adam Koós, President, Portfolio Manager, and Senior Financial Advisor at Libertas Wealth Management Group at libertaswealth.com.
Hello, everyone. My wife, Donna, and I were just out on a date night last week, and we started talking about Dr. Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages. Now, I've got a secret here. For those who know me well, they already know this, but the truth is, I am a big-time closet romantic. I think the other couple was actually surprised to hear that when I was only 15 years of age, I went out, bought, and read John Gray's Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus books. And then, if that wasn't strange enough as a 15-year-old, I went out and bought Mars and Venus Together Forever. So I'm a little embarrassed to publicly admit this, but it's the truth. As we were having this discussion about relationships with our friends the other night, it got me thinking this week about all the different types of personalities that we work with at our office, having over 300 different clients of all kinds, ages, business owners, and so on, and what I'd call money love languages that exist out there. So have you ever wondered what your money love language might be? That's what we're going to talk about today. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. If this is your first time listening or watching, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you learn a little bit more on each and every episode so that you become more successful, wealthier, happier, and more educated than you were before you started listening today. So come back often. Feel free to subscribe. We're on iTunes and YouTube. So whether you're a listener and want to get on the treadmill or in the car and you want to listen on iTunes, or if you are more of a watcher and you want to watch it on YouTube, we're on both mediums. In addition, you can also follow me on Twitter at Adam Koós and on Instagram. I always like to start with a quote. If you've ever seen our podcast before or any of our screencasts in the past, I love quotes. I collect them. And today it's a perfect quote for what we're talking about. It's actually the author of The 5 Love Languages, Dr. Gary Chapman. He said, "I'm amazed by how many individuals mess up every new day with yesterday." And I think that's not only applicable when it comes to our relationships in life, whether that be our spouse, partner, loved ones, family, sisters, brothers, parents, but also when it comes to our money and our investing and our financial planning, wealth management, retirement planning, and so on, estate planning. We always have to know ourselves, and I think that's one of the biggest lessons I want to get across today is we need to know who we are. Every one of you out there who are listening to this or watching this, you need to first understand who you are and know yourself before you can ever be a truly successful, stress-free investor. Everybody who is planning their retirement, which is almost everyone, I would hope, is going to have pitfalls along the way. There's going to be things that happen in the stock market, in the economy. There are going to be pandemics. There are going to be things we can't control. And as a result of this, we need to understand who we are as people. We need to understand our money love language. We need to understand our emotions and how we deal with risk so that we can get through these times that will inevitably continue to occur time and time again. But I'm not going to get into stocks today. We're talking about money personalities. So let's first talk about the love languages. Just so for those of you who have not read the book, The 5 Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman, I want to go over what those love languages are just so you can get a reference point of what we're talking about here. The first love language is what's called words of affirmation. These are people who, the way they feel loved is through spoken words, being praised, feeling appreciated. The second type is what's called quality time. So the second love language would be somebody who wants undivided attention. These people who appreciate eye contact and undivided listening and good listening skills. The third type is what's called physical touch. This is somebody who just appreciates a touch on the arm, hand-holding, or a massage at the end of the day. That's how these people feel affection and feel loved. The fourth type is what's called acts of service. These would be people who feel really loved when you gas up the car for them, or you do the dishes, or maybe if you give mom some time off, or if you're retired, you do a favor for your spouse or your partner that they know that you don't like. So that would be the acts of service love language. And then the last one is what's called receiving gifts. And I think this is often misperceived, and I don't think it's actually one of the most common ones, but these are people that it's not about the gift itself. It's not about literally getting gifts all the time and presents. I think it's more about the time and effort it takes to buy the gift just for you. So it's the time and effort that went into it. So as they say, the thought that counts. So those are the 5 love languages. And I'm, while I have a finance and psychology double major, I'm not here to be a psychologist or a therapist because I'm highly unqualified to do that. But what I want to talk about are the 5 most important money love languages. And then we're going to there's another few that I'll just briefly touch on that aren't nearly as popular or as common. But let's talk about the top 5 money love languages. And one of the things you're going to find out is that you're going to identify with either one of these, or maybe you're going to be a blend of a couple of them. So the first and most common money love language is what's called a family steward. In fact, a survey done by CEG went out to a ton of high net worth individuals. And of these individuals who responded to the survey, 34.1% of them considered themselves to be family stewards. What's a family steward? A family steward is somebody who says wealth management, financial planning, retirement planning, estate planning, this is all about taking care of my family. That's what's most important to me. I consider myself to be conservative, both in my personal and professional life. And a family steward might also say to themselves, I don't consider myself to be very knowledgeable when it comes to investing. It's just not my thing. But again, it's all about taking care of my family. That's the first money love language and the most common. The second most common money love language is what's called the independence, or this is the number 2 personality type. The independence would say something like, I like the personal freedom that money provides me. Or I feel investing is a necessary means to an end, and I feel like I do a pretty good job of saving. They also might say, I'm not really interested in the process of investing or wealth management. But again, I really understand that it's a means to an end, and I really appreciate all the freedom and security and safety that it provides. And this is, like I said, the number 2 most common money love language or money personality type, and it's 16.8% of respondents. The third type of money love language is what's called a phobic. Now, the phobics, about 11.4% of those responded and said that they were a phobic. And I know it comes across sounding like it's got a negative connotation, but it's not. These are just people who say, I'm confused and I'm frustrated about the world of wealth management, the stock market, retirement planning, income planning, tax planning, estate planning. It's all just frustrating and confusing to me. I don't really like managing my finances, and I really generally avoid talking about it if I can. And then the other thing they might say, a phobic might say, trust is absolutely critical to me, because without trusting the professional that helps me with my finances, I feel even more lost and frustrated. So those are our phobics, who are the number 3 most common money love language or money personality type. The number 4 most common is what's called the anonymous. Now, these people are interesting, and again, they're not super common. Only 8.3% of those who responded consider themselves to be the anonymous money love language or personality type. And what they typically say is confidentiality is my number 1 biggest concern. My money's my business, and it's nobody else's. They might also say, when it comes to my financial affairs, privacy is of the utmost importance to me. And I often worry about cybersecurity threats to my accounts, so I need to feel safe and protected with someone that I trust because I don't want my identity stolen, for instance. So this is the anonymous personality type or money love language. And then the 5th most common is what's called the accumulator. Only 6.1% of those out there are accumulators, but these are people who say, I care more about growing my investment portfolio than I really do about the retirement planning or wealth management process. One of my biggest priorities is to get top-notch returns on my investments, but I often find myself frustrated with the results. However, I tend to live below my means and I spend frugally, so I really don't worry too much about ever running out of money. This is our accumulator personality type. Of those top 5, and I'll run through them just briefly again, the family steward, the independents, phobics, the anonymous, and the accumulators. I wonder if you think to yourself, where do you see yourself fitting in either one of those categories or perhaps, again, a blend of 2 of them? Now, there are another few money love languages that I'm just going to say right up front. These are not good clients for us. In fact, I would question whether or not they're good clients for any professional financial advisory firm, financial planning firm. But the first type of less common money love language would be a mogul. The moguls are people who say, I like control. Being rich means having power, and I make quick decisions and I rarely look back. So that's one of them. The second least common or less common would be the VIP. The VIPs are people who say there's lots of ways to get respect, and having money is one of those ways. Now, these people might like prized possessions. They might see status as being important to them. Gamblers is the next money love language that is, again, less common, and not necessarily a good client for us, but these are people who say, I consider myself to be pretty aggressive. I love the stock market. I think investing is exciting, and when it's not, I'm bored. So we often say at our office, if investing is exciting, you're probably not doing it well, or at least it's going to be short-lived. That's the third, we'll call it less common money love language or personality type. And the last one is called an innovator. Now, the innovators are usually extremely intelligent people. These are people who say, I'm a really sophisticated investor. I'm pretty tech savvy too. I love investing in stock options, derivatives, and cryptocurrencies are the best thing since sliced bread. So these are people who want to be on the cutting edge, kind of like the gamblers, pretty aggressive. They tend to be younger. They don't tend to be much older than, say, 50, 55 years of age. I think when most of us start hitting our 50s, we start getting a lot more serious about our long-term retirement planning, retirement income planning, estate planning, and so on. But like I said, the moguls, VIPs, gamblers, and innovators are typically not going to be good clients for us, but they are out there. So if we review them just briefly, again, we've got the family stewards, which is the most common money love language. We've got the independents. These are the people who see money as a way to freedom. We've got the phobics, are people who are really confused. They're frustrated about the world of wealth management. They don't like managing their finances. They don't like talking about it. And trust is really important to them because they feel lost. The people who feel that confidentiality is paramount are the anonymous personality type, the anonymous money love language. They want to make sure everything's private. They want to make sure we're not sending anything via email that would even remotely relate to their finances. This is really important to them. And it is important, by the way. And then the accumulators. These are the people who they want to grow their investment portfolio. They typically have quite a bit of money, but they don't really care too much about the retirement planning side of things. They don't care about wealth management as much. At least it's not as important to them. I don't want to say they don't care about it. And then, again, pretty frugal, and they've done pretty well for themselves. And because they're so frugal and they've saved enough, they don't generally really worry about running out of money. And then, again, we have our VIPs, moguls, gamblers, and innovators. So those are our money love languages. And again, try to think of yourself, what type of investor are you? What type of retirement planning individual are you? Are you a family steward? Most people are. So chances are, the odds are you're probably a family steward, but maybe you're also somebody who's an independent, or also somebody where confidentiality is really important to you. So maybe you're also somebody who is an anonymous as well. Now, just another thing I wanted to go over, because this goes back to knowing yourself, understanding yourself, because it's crucial. Again, I can't reiterate more how crucial it is to understand who you are and your own emotions as you go through your life when it comes to your retirement planning, accumulation of assets, and then you cross over into the distribution phase of your life when you retire and you have to provide yourself with a paycheck to supplement your Social Security income and pension if you have one. So the biggest investor emotional pitfalls, and these are fear, greed, and neither. So let's talk about fear first. So a fear would sound something like this. It would sound like, hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic, the stock market's crashing, bad news is everywhere, I'm terrified of losing more money, which is why I'm so conservative. So this is typically a situation where people are fearful because the sky is falling, and as a result, they are conservative, whether that's who they really are all the time, or if it's because that's who they are at the time, and there's a difference. Similarly speaking, but quite the opposite, is greed. Greed might sound like this. The stock market's going up. I keep seeing and hearing all-time highs in the stock market on the radio and TV, And even though I have a diversified portfolio with more than just stocks, of course, I feel like I should be making more money. So therefore, I consider myself to be more aggressive, and I want to put more money in stocks. Can you start to see what's going on here? You start to see that there's this change where we tend to joke at our office that investors, behaviorally speaking, from a psychological standpoint, are conservative when the market's going down, and they are aggressive when it's going up. So how someone feels about their risk tolerance and their ability to take on market volatility and the ups and downs and ebbs and flows of the stock market, or bond market for that matter, has everything to do with how they feel at that time and what the market's doing at that time. So the third, like I said, it's fear, greed, and neither. Neither might sound like this. You might sound like, look, there's not a lot of news stirring, not a whole lot going on TV. I really don't even hear about the stock market these days. I'm focused on other things like my family, my friends, maybe work, maybe volunteering. And I consider myself, if you asked me, and I'd say I consider myself to be somewhere in the middle risk-wise. Maybe somebody who I want to make money, and that's important to grow my money, but I don't want to lose it. And that's what, again, most people say. I'm going to go out on a limb here with no statistical evidence to share here today and say it's going to be 90% of people that say, I want to make money, I want to grow my money, but I just don't want to lose too much. Everyone says that. And again, when we go back to that fear and greed, we need to understand that there are certain things we can and cannot control in the market, and we need to understand how we should react to those things when they inevitably occur in the future, whether that's a pandemic, which we just went through, obviously, and how that affected the market, or whether that's whatever the next apocalypse du jour happens to be, whether that be next year, the year after, and so on. So one of the things that can help us with that, one of the two things, this is the less important one, is understanding how fast you metaphorically drive your retirement plan or your investment portfolio. We all understand, I'm sure at this point, and most people listening to this podcast or watching this podcast probably understand that the more risk you take, the more reward you deserve over time. Now, the key phrase is over time, because again, any investment strategy, unless it's just absolutely crazy, investing in some not so well-known cryptocurrency, let's just say, almost any well-known investment strategy will work over time. The number one reason why individuals and couples and business owners' financial plans fail is because those individuals, couples, and business owners abandon their plan, their financial plan. And the number one reason they abandon their financial plan is because of short-term volatility, short-term risk, and it just is too much to take. It's too much to handle. So they either they sell and they go to cash, they go to CDs, or they fire their financial advisor, then go find someone else, and they hope it'll be different next time. So the bottom line here is that you have to understand yourself when it comes to how sensitive you are to short-term volatility in the market. You got to know what's going to cause you to lose sleep at night and how to avoid those things. And you got to know at what point in the short term, understanding we're thinking long term here, we're thinking even if you're retired, you're still going to live for another 20, 30 years perhaps. So you're still thinking with a long-term time horizon. At what point in the short term would that volatility in that short term cause you to freak out and abandon your long-term plan? And one of the ways you can do that is if you go to our website at libertaswealth.com, right at the top of the webpage is a free portfolio risk analysis that will churn basically 4 questions that you answer. You'll have the ability to change your answer a few times, but it'll turn how you feel about market volatility and risk into a speed limit. If you're above 70, I would say that you're probably closer to being more of an aggressive investor. If you're somewhere between 50 and 70, you're probably a balanced investor. And if you're below 50, below 45-ish, then you're probably more of a conservative investor. But again, like I said earlier, that changes over time. If we learned, it was really interesting last year in 2020, we learned that when clients who had hired us in 2019, 2018, 2017 had taken this same quiz or the risk assessment, it's not quiz because there's no right or wrong answers, obviously, but when they took this assessment, we found that during the pandemic or after the pandemic last year, their speed limit changed. And I'll give you one guess what direction it went. And it wasn't up. It did not go up after the pandemic. So as time changes, as we go through certain circumstances and life events, our tolerance for taking short-term risk changes. And what's most important is that we can stick to our long-term plan. And that's the last thing I want to talk about here, is that investing your money is not enough. Knowing your money love language, super important. Helps you stick to your plan, helps you understand yourself, and so that you can be prepared in the future for inevitably tough market environments. Understanding the concept of fear and greed, and when neither fear nor greed is occurring, when we're not in a crisis and when we're not in a moving market, understanding how to react to those things is really important. But what's most important is having a long-term, comprehensive, holistic financial plan that goes through not only all your expenses, fixed expenses, variable expenses, one-time expenses, replacing your cars every so many years net after trade-in, how many big vacations you're going to take, how many road trips you're going to take, if you're going to buy a new home, move out of state, but also what's the probability, because nothing's black and white in this world, right? There is no certainties. It's all probabilities. So what is the probability that you make it from now to the end of your life without ever running out of money? And what we want to see when we do these financial plans, and this is called a Monte Carlo analysis, by the way, we want to see a probability north of 70 to 75% in a perfect world. Now, if we pull up a linear analysis, we could get a better result looking at a flat rate of return every year, but that's not taking into account inflation. It's not taking into account market volatility, short-term or long-term bear markets. So we have to take all of those things into account. And then we need to do what's called what-if analyses, or we like to call them stress tests. So this is where we might say, if you're not retired yet, we might say, what if you retired early? Could we do that? What if we retired later? What if you spent too much? What if there was unexpected expenses? What if you're retired and all of a sudden you got hit with a huge long-term care expense, whether that be for one or both of you, and it lasted 5 years? Average cost of a long-term care facility here in Ohio, about $72,000 to $80,000 a year. That can put a dent in a portfolio. And there's estate planning things that we can do to avoid that. But I digress. At the end of the day, we need to make sure that we understand who we are. We need to understand our money love language. We need to understand the difference between times when it's very easy to be greedy, times when it's very easy to be fearful and freak out and put our heads in the sand, times when neither is going on and why that's important to understand. And then to understand how much risk we should be taking and to make sure we have a roadmap in place. If you wanted to go on vacation and you wanted to drive from coast to coast, from New York to San Diego, and you did not have a GPS system, you did not have Google Maps, or if you remember a good old MapQuest, Donna, my wife, and I were just talking about how we used to always have to print out MapQuest directions every time we went anywhere because we didn't have GPS. Nobody had GPS on their phones, nothing, right? So this is new technology. But imagine you don't have a map, you don't have a triptych. For those of you who remember triptychs from AAA, how are you going to get from New York to San Diego safely and without missing too much construction and things of that nature, and get there smoothly without too much stress? And the answer to that, when it comes to your financial house or your financial directions, is a financial plan. So with that all being said, we're going to go ahead and end for today. Feel free to share this episode, or I should say, please share this episode with your friends and family. And if you'd like to discuss your personal situation further, remember that you never have to be a client to ask a question. If you'd like to set up an introduction call or a Zoom meeting, just head over to our website at libertaswealth.com, and you can actually get access to our calendar right there on the left side of the webpage, or you can email us on the right-hand side of the webpage instead, or you can just email us at info@libertaswealth.com. As I always say, there are thousands of podcasts out there, and you chose to give ours a listen today. So thank you so much for tuning in.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you like a second opinion on your retirement plan or investment strategy, please head over to libertaswealth.com. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as legal, financial, tax, or as a basis for investment decisions. Always consult a certified financial planner or a fee-only fiduciary advisor before acting on any ideas discussed.